We aren't supposed to feel happy and positive all the time. In fact, it's bad for your brain, it's bad for your mind, and it's bad for your body, and it's bad for your relationships. We're supposed to have a more balanced life. I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf. I'm your host, and this is Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. Welcome to this podcast. And today I'm going to talk about why toxic positivity, which is all over the place, you can find out lots about toxic positivity, why being positive all the time is actually really harmful and bad for your mental health and bad for your brain, bad for your body, bad for your mind, bad for your psychoneurobiological network. Well, too much positivity is toxic because one of the main reasons it can harm people who are going through difficult times. So if people are going through a difficult time and they need to process it, how many times have you heard me, you listen to me? And other people, great therapists, and just don't even have to be a therapist. Logically, we say to each other, not everything's going to be great all the time. It's okay to go through this. It's okay to cry. Allow yourself to cry. We know that instinctively that it's not going, when you're going through a difficult time, you need to process that. You don't want to be happy when something is bad that's going on in your life. You need to be allowed to process it without feeling guilt. And this whole thing of being positive all the time and you've got to just take that and immediately say something positive is completely unrealistic and completely unbalanced. And people feel guilty when they don't feel positive all the time. There's so many environments that I've been in where I have done keynote addresses and people come up to me at the book table and just say that, they feel such a relief, like these chains have dropped when I've said that, hey, listen, it's actually harmful to our mental health, to our brain, to our psychoneurobiological networks when you try and feel positive all the time. And I don't teach positive thinking. I don't believe in teaching positive thinking because it's not healthy for the mind and the brain. I teach what I teach and what I research, which is what I teach, and what I did in my practice is to help people to recognize where they're at, process through that, and then reconceptualize that. And that doesn't mean, that's certainly not just taking a positive thought and slapping it on something that's negative or slapping it on that's something that's, in a Band-Aid fashion. It's kind of just think the positive thought, but then you don't deal with the issue. It doesn't work. It creates so much cognitive dissonance in your mind, which creates so much disruption to the networks of your mind, brain, and body. It actually causes inflammation in the brain. And where there's inflammation, there's vulnerability to disease. So that is quite a heavy statement. So rather than, what also happens is if one is toxically positive all the time, it tends to, what I've said here in my notes is it tends to stop a person sharing genuine human emotions. You've got to be positive all the time. So let's say something bad happens and someone turns around and says, there's a good side to that they always just want to give you the positive before you've processed that. You don't get a genuine, it stops good, deep, genuine interaction and sharing of emotions and empathy building. And you don't feel, and it's happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to you, and you don't feel like you're getting that unconditional support that we as humans just need. When we're going through tough times, we need that unconditional support. I'm telling you what you already know. So, like telling someone to be positive in the midst of that is kind of lacking in empathy, and, it blocks that beautiful, deep, meaningful, genuine human empathic connections that we need to have, and it can invalidate what someone's going through. Also, if we constantly just slap on a positive emotion, you don't grow as a human. Because you're not going through anything. Growth requires, it's hard. It requires going through hard stuff. It requires learning from your mistakes and all those things that we also know. So if you're going to just constantly slap on the positive thing, it's going to affect how you grow and mature and develop your character. So thinking things also thinking constantly, that's got to be positive and slapping on, the toxic positivity thing also tends to lead to the avoidance of facing the painful stuff. The only way you're going to get through the painful stuff is to feel it. You have to acknowledge it and process it. You have to embrace, process, and reconceptualize. So being toxically positive, you don't embrace, process, and reconceptualize. And that basically keeps the toxicity in your network. And that becomes this driving force, creates the inflammation in the brain because the brain is saying, hey, there's something toxic here. And the brain's immune system doesn't distinguish between a psychological pain and a physical pain because it's still proteins that are folded incorrectly with imbalanced chemicals and so on. So the immune system will then see this, will basically see this as an invasion and will send out immune factors to create inflammation. And if the whole idea of the immune system is to do that in order for the body the various different parts of the body, as well as the psychological hurts, to be healed through work, through time, through doing the work over time. And then from there, the inflammation then will go away. But if you just suppress it, it doesn't go away. So then you get a hyperimmune response, and that then has a downward effect on pretty much all the systems of your body. And that's how our vulnerability to disease, to lifestyle diseases, can increase over time if we don't deal with it. So being toxically positive increases your vulnerability over time to disease. So also in the same vein, being toxically positive is also denies us the ability to face challenging feelings as an opportunity that can ultimately lead to growth and deeper insight, which I've basically said, which is a great loss to our self-development and towards being a decent human. We need to really look at those challenging feelings and grow through them. So to a mature, developing human, which is a constant ongoing life process, can be inhibited by being toxically positive all the time. Additionally, thinking positive all the time and not expecting bad things to happen is going to set you up for failure. So when things do, which they will, bad things do happen, you've got no resilience. You've masked your resilience. And that's another major thing, that toxic positivity or expecting things to be happy and positive all the time. It suppresses your natural resilience. And so it's not, that resilience is not, which is naturally part of us, is not exercised. So when something does happen, you can break, you break more easily. Instead of bending like those tall reeds in the wind that bend, it's brittle and breaks. And then there's a lot of more, it's more difficult to repair a break than it is a bend, if that makes any sense. So, being positive all the time just doesn't prepare you for the realities of life. And, that's not, not good. It really is. It's that probability possibility thing that I've spoken about in a few podcasts. It's kind of the hope for the best, see the possibilities. That's the hope for the best. But the probabilities are, let's plan for what could potentially be worse than that. Let's put all these probabilities in place. We still got that possibility. We're hoping for the best, but these are the things that could go wrong, which is much better for your resilience, your mental health, your mind-brain-body connection. It's realistic. It aligns the psychoneurobiology more effectively and so on. Another reason why there's such a strong kind of toxic positivity movement, I believe, is because that we have an incorrect mental health philosophy. And I've spoken a lot about this. That this thing that as soon as you feel uncomfortable or bad, you've got to suppress that feeling. You've got to kind of get rid of it. It's got to go. It's bad. It's a symptom of a disease. And instead of embracing, processing, and reconceptualizing, there's this suppression thing, which is really not good. And also, it leads to looking at yourself differently. If you are told that you're not positive, oh, there's something wrong with you. I've done a podcast on this as well in more depth, which you can go listen to. But if, being anxious doesn't mean you're mentally ill or broken. Not being positive, being maybe a little bit negative doesn't mean that it's a symptom of a disease. You're not broken. So, there's this tendency to pathologize and medicalize misery instead of facing and processing. And it's never a good idea. Research shows, our gut instinct knows this. I've done this work for years. This need, when we live in a toxically positive environment that's always wanting to get rid of things that make us feel uncomfortable, then there's always this need to look for ways to suppress instead of sit with and go through the uncomfortable things. So it's that Band-Aid quick fix approach, which I'm not saying something you haven't already thought about or heard, but it's good to be reminded that really, we mustn't look to suppress. We need to learn to sit with. We need to learn to be able to live with ourselves. Can you sit with your stuff? Can you live with yourself? Can you grieve still living with yourself and not trying to do something to distract yourself or throw a Band-Aid positive word on top? Also, our consumerism society we live in often promotes the idea that purchasing certain products or experiences will lead to the avoidance of pain. There's a lot of that in the self-help and mental health and biohacking sort of approaches now, where it's if I have that device, that gadget, that external thing, it's going to get rid of the pain. Sure, it may take off some of the feelings, it may make things a little easier, but it's not fixing the problem. It's a quick fix once again. We need to work through our stuff. We need to embrace, process, and reconceptualize. That's mind management. So we don't want to, if that's the constant zeitgeist, if that's the constant messaging which we get in our society, then it kind of encourages sort of the thinking of you've got to be positive, you've got to flee from difficulties. You've got to desire a life that's free from any difficulties, and that's not realistic. That doesn't make you a very nice human to try and desire that kind of thing. So it creates unrealistic expectations. It creates mental health issues. It creates inauthenticity, and it creates overlooked growth opportunities. So just very quickly, so when we have this toxic positivity, we're going to have unrealistic expectations, which I've already referenced. So this is the obsession with constant positivity, creating unrealistic expectations that lead to disappointment when reality doesn't meet these expectations. In terms of toxic positivity and mental health issues, the pressure to maintain a facade of happiness and perfection can contribute to mental health issues. So to maintain a facade that I'm okay, it's fine. I mean, not if someone's feeling down, you've got to hide it. You've got to pretend and say something positive or say some whatever uplifting thing. It's stealing from people. It's stealing a growth from people. And it creates boomerangs back and actually creates more anxiety and depression. So because people are compelled to sort of hide their struggles and vulnerabilities, and that doesn't make them go away, that makes them bigger. And kind of invades like a virus the rest of their life issues. Inauthenticity will come from toxic positivity, constantly pursuing the appearance of, I'm positive, I'm healthy, I've got this under control. It leads to inauthenticity, as I mentioned. It invalidates other people when they're going through some things. People may hide their true feelings and experiences to conform to societal norms. So people are hiding stuff just to conform to maybe some kind of belief system that you're in, some sort of, maybe religious or whatever environment where you can't talk about, or family environment where there's a culture has been created where you can't talk about the negative. You're only allowed to talk about the positive. It's just not normal or healthy to do that. And then it's an overlooked growth opportunity, as I've already mentioned. Challenges and adversity, as we know, they are part of the personal growth. They're how the pearl forms in the oyster in the oyster shell. The obsession with constant positivity can lead to missed opportunity. So the obsession with constant positivity will lead to missed opportunities. You're going to miss opportunities for tremendous growth in you as a person that will make you happier in the long run. So it kind of steals your happiness. So we've got to have a balanced perspective. It's essential to recognize that, as we know. I'm just going to tell you what you know. Life is ups and downs. Allow yourself to have both. It's good to have both. A balanced perspective acknowledges the hardships, the setbacks, the negative emotions, and are a natural part of the human experience. So striving to be positive is, I don't even want to say it's admirable. It is, I would say that striving to be positive is, in realism, is actually, our goal should not to be strive to be positive. We should strive to actually see and embrace anything that gives us an opportunity for growth. So anything that's where we are told to be toxically positive and to be, well, if something happens to you and someone says, hey, see the positive side or whatever, just say, hey, I need the time to actually embrace this and process it and reconceptualize it. And if some positive statement comes out of that process, then sure, I will focus on that positive, but I'm going to embrace process and reconceptualize all the probabilities with the hope of a healthy outcome. And that's kind of how I approach life and how I help my patients approach life. And if you look at the science, that creates a much healthier psychoneurobiological network. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please like, subscribe, share with friends and family. And remember to join me next week again for some more tips on how to help you manage your mind. Thanks for joining me. See you soon.